Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Jake and Joseph from Witherfall to talk about the upcoming album, Curse of Autumn, March 5th, Century Media. That's the date of the release. How are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Yeah, good, Pedro. Good to see you again, man.
I know. It's always nice to see you. It's always nice to see you guys. And I think this is the first time that we're doing on the channel. This is first time ever we're having a threesome.
Wow.
We've never done this before, so we're walking into uncharted waters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Let me start off by asking you guys, how much of the previous albums did you guys take into making this one, as far as learning from the mistakes of the past, learning from the processes of how things work, what didn't work? How much of that went into the making of this album?
Nothing in the writing, nothing at all in the writing. It's the same process every time with the writing. This time we went ahead and made sure that the personnel we were hiring didn't have any obvious glaring issues at the time we hired them.
Yeah, I mean, every record, there's a reason why it's called Curse of Autumn. There's a curse around Witherfall, and it has to do with production staff.
Yeah. Do you feel like the curse is lifted?
No.
Obviously not.
I feel like we have to exercise some demons here, but now that you have a chance to look at what you guys have accomplished with this record, I'm sure you're happy with the final product. Otherwise, you wouldn't be putting it out there.
No, we're totally happy with the final product. And believe it or not, this record actually was the easiest record to make on a behind the scenes area with the production staff that we had. I mean, everybody was super pro. We were working with Marco Miniman on drums and Anthony, who we've worked with since Nocturnes. And we had the production team of Jim Morris and Schaefer on there, and Tom doing all the mastering. So it's all professional. Yeah, we had that engineer at Doghouse. So everything was actually very smooth. I mean, also besides doing this during a pandemic, that was a whole other ball of wax to try to comb through.
Well, there was no traffic, at least, when we had to go to the studio.
Yeah, in LA, being able to get from Hollywood to Woodland Hills in 20 minutes was a fucking miracle.
How do you guys define the roles between yourselves in terms of who takes care of what when you're starting to sit down and say, okay, it's time to create the next Witherfall album?
No, there's no roles. We just sit down and write. Yeah,
for the writing process, totally it. We just have the role is who's bringing over what bottle of wine.
Yeah. You mean which initial bottles?
Yeah, yeah. He's bringing over the case. Yeah, it's so organic with Joseph and I. Just whenever we write, it's we just get into a room and have some wine, of course, and then work on some ideas, and that's pretty much how it's worked since the beginning.
We don't have that traditional singer guitar player relationship. We approach this like we're two composers sitting down with either pen and paper or on a putting stuff into a laptop that's already realized. We don't really experiment. We just write, and we let the whole thing evolve, like Jake said, naturally.
Do you give yourselves like some sort of deadline, or you guys just work it, and once it's done, it's done?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much. Once it's done, it's done. But we'll have like an idea. I mean, sometimes it's good to have deadlines to kind of push yourself a little bit, and then your writing will be influenced by that. So, and plus you have to, especially when you're dealing with like the staff that we hired, some of these guys are booked out a year in advance. Mm-hmm. So there has to be some sort of deadline to be able to actually get the stuff done. And, of course, with this year, those deadlines got completely fucked and pushed. So it didn't matter.
Yeah, I think the last record, or the last couple of records, the challenge was just finding the time in between our tours to get together. you know, it kind of limits us. Like now there is no real no real limit to the amount of time we can get together. It's just like but back then it was the only limiting factor was the actual time that we have free. The writing itself is usually really painless. I mean, that goes back all the way to the first time we got together to write after White Wizard. You know, we wrote the main melody and rhythm sections you hear on Nocturnes like in maybe 3 or 4 sessions. Like nothing. I mean, it's I'm kind of understating it too though, because when we get together, it's not like a couple hours and then like, you know, we go to the movies or go play video games. It's fucking like 16 hours. You know, the only break is to go maybe eat and get alcohol before the fucking store closes, you know, and then we're like up till 7 a.m., you know, working.
Who's the voice of reason between the two of you when you reach a point where you guys are stuck and you need like you need something? Is there one of you that kind of has that
No.
power, that grip, or you look outside the box for that?
No, we actually are really good at like being able to edit ourselves when something's not working. Like for example, like the track All Blew Away, which is the long 15-minute opus, like we actually came up with the idea of the Boston song during a break from that, because it was just like, I mean, that song All Blew Away took quite a bit of time to write, because it's just there's so many different movements going on and different pieces to it. So there were points where we had to like step away and be like, okay, you know, let's take a breath from this. And so
I don't even think it was the writing that took the long time. What it was figuring out what exactly was going on with some of the time signatures, because some of them are like down to a 16th note, and getting them into Pro Tools so we can create the tempo maps to track the drums. Like that's what's time consuming, you know, like we have it in our heads, you know, and you're just clicking it out. Like Jake's got the guitar and I'm clicking out like, okay, they're like, okay. And we figure out what it is. Then it's getting it in there so that the drummer or whoever we're working with can understand what the hell we're trying to do. Cause you know, we're not going to send them over a score, you know, like we have to have some sort of audio representation,
but
that's the stuff that's labor intensive,
yeah,
you know.
but when it comes to like just being able to edit ourselves and be like, okay, this isn't working out, we pretty much know, we can feel it in the air.
Yeah, I don't think we put anything out there if we don't like it, you know.
No, like we've done stuff too where we've had songs that we've completely reworked, like on the last record, not Curse of Autumn, but Prelude to Sorrow. We had this track called Communion of the Wicked, and it had a whole other arrangement, and we were listening back to it one night, probably early in the morning. We're like, you know what, this just isn't working for us. You know, we can, and once we have like an initial like thought that it's not working, then we know for a fact. It's like there's no second guessing it.
It was just the chorus though. Like everything else is basically the same as far as like the way the intro was, the weird time shifts. What I meant by we don't put anything out, I mean we don't put it out into the world. Like I'm not gonna hum Jake a melody or like suggest some like, you know, chord progression if I don't already like it or, you know, think it's awesome. Like I just, if I hear something that's boring to me, it doesn't become reality. Like no one ever hears it.
Well, one of the things that we were talking before we pressed record was about the structure. I was talking to Jake about this because I feel like it's really important and a lot of people kind of skim through it. But the structure of an album, in my opinion, plays a huge role on how much you're going to enjoy the record and how much the record plays out in the playability of the album itself. How do you guys matched on this album the overall structure that you put together with the diversity of sound that the record has within itself?
Well, like there's the trilogy in there with the instrumental Curse of Autumn and the Other Side of Fear. That's all composed together. So that's easy. Stuff like that's easy. The sequencing, I think, just comes naturally. I mean, that's not like there's just certain songs that need to run from one to the next.
it comes when we're writing them too. Like we'll be like, okay, this is a pretty good second track, or like All Blew Away. You're like, okay, well, you don't want to start the record off with this song, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like this, you know, and we kind of with our records have built a little bit of like you know, this really kind of the last track is going to be a major big epic. You know, we've kind of done that with every release so far. So, and I've always liked that growing up. Metallica used to have a certain sequence to their records, at least the first 4 or 5. And I always thought that was a cool thing, a little signature trait. So there's things like that. But yeah, when we're basically working on it, like I think Last Scar, it's like, okay, this is going to open up the record, you know, because it's, and there's certain things too that you're like, okay, this makes sense. We also love like Queen 2, how it just in Night at the Opera, where the sequencing, it just sounds like sometimes it's one full long song, and it's all part of that journey that we're trying to create.
Yeah. Also, like we used to do this a lot more. Now we do it without really thinking about it. But we used to really geek out on like just like the harmonic progression of how songs go in like from one to the other. Because we don't just write in, let's say, like all E flat, like some bands, every song's in the same fucking key, so it really doesn't matter. But like we have some really adventurous keys that we work in that most metal bands don't really delve into. So like you'll get like where you end on like the 5 chord of the next fucking song, and it really creates this awesome flow harmonically from one song to the next. We did that a lot on Nocturnes. Sometimes it's kind of like weird and sinister too, like, and it's like I'm glad that little accident happened.
Yeah, if you have a fucking minor too, like I'm just imagining like, you know, you're going from like a D and the next song's in C sharp and you get that, it's gonna be self-jarring.
Yep.
But that's like more like that composition type thing that we like, where it's like the bigger picture of the record, like listening to the record from start to finish and not randomly putting it on I don't know, shuffle or some shit like that. And like that always used to piss me off. Like when I'm at like the gym and like I'm hearing like a song that I know is supposed to cut into another one. Feeling that way in Anytime by Journey, and like feeling that way, and then all of a sudden Lights comes on afterwards, and you're like, what the fuck? Like where is this isn't right.
It's not meant to be this way.
What's that?
Yeah, it's not meant to be that way. It
Yeah,
feels
exactly.
like it just feels out of place.
Totally. Yeah.
I like to, like, you know, we always talk about this in interviews. We're really classically influenced, and like I love stuff like in Don Giovanni, you'll have a really soft aria, and then you got the bam, bam, you know, like what the fuck, like all the dynamic shifts, like really like sharp contrast. Like I love stuff like that.
I felt like you guys had a little bit of that on this record, because you gave us a sequence of songs that doesn't repeat itself. Like you don't get the first song to sound like the second song, to sound like the third song, to sound like the fourth song. Like you gave us a song that puts us in one mood, and then the next song eases you into a different mood, and then the song after that kind of breaks all the furniture in the house, and it's a super heavier track, and then the track after that becomes mellow again. It always keeps, from my perspective as a listener, it keeps me on my toes. I just don't know what you guys are going to give me around the corner, and because I don't know what's coming around the corner, I'm not turning it off, because I'm kind of like, hey, like what's next? I want to see what's next. It's like that cliffhanger. It's almost like each track ends on a cliffhanger, and you don't know what's going to come next, you know?
That's like, and that's totally what we wanted to do. It should be like a roller coaster ride. And I mean, I personally don't really like records too that every song sounds the same. Like you were talking about the moods. Like if you're raging the entire time, like that's gonna get old after a while. And if it's a little too mellow, you know, it's the same thing. It's like kind of like eating the same food, the same flavor. So definitely, like, I think that's cool that you're able to pick up on that, you know, that's our goal, is to have those different peaks and valleys, because again, it makes it interesting, you know. I think it'd be kind of dumb to get a record that was like all the heavy stuff at first, and then the other half would be all light, you know. It'd be like it would almost be, the art wouldn't really make sense, unless I guess that's their intention. But you know, I could see some weird shit like that happening, but not with us.
Yeah, I mean, Jake, Jake
Sorry, go ahead.
mentions Queen. Jake mentions Queen, but like we also love like the Guns N' Roses Use Your Illusion records, where like you really like if you never heard those records all the way through, you'd be like, what the fuck is this? Like You Ain't the First, like just comes out of nowhere, like it's a completely different band. Like, and I don't think we plan it really. Like we just sit down and write, and if the song is a good song and it works in the context of what we're doing, as far as the thematically, then we go with it. It's not like we sit down and go, okay, now we got to have a early 90s rock ballad fucking, like it never happens that way. It's just like, like you have to use a song once you've got into it, like that's a good song.
I just found that was interesting that you guys are able to create that, but the DNA of the band is still present on every single song. So regardless of the mood, regardless of the shifts, it's not like you're feeling that things are changing or like you guys are forcing something that's not organic into the band. So how do you keep that balance of being able to create something that goes in different directions, but at the same time, it's still Witherfall all the way through?
It's the guys too. Like the players, they're like everybody that plays on the record are, top-notch musicians who are also really like diverse in their musical interests.
But
they're not going to lose the plot,
That's a good point, because when Joseph and I write, like again, like we had stated before, we don't really ever think about it. Like it's just, we have such a wide array of influences from classical to modern pop to 80s pop to you name it, we can find something in there that will be like, that has some cool shit. And like Joseph's saying, if you put like guys like Anthony grew up in a gospel and R&B background, so he's got that, and he's going to come in to it with those influences, but at the same time, he's playing our compositions. So it's without a doubt going to have a different kind of atmosphere to it. But, Joseph and I are the ones steering the ship.
The first thing that I mentioned on my review, I haven't posted the review yet, so you guys haven't seen it. But one of the things that I mentioned on my review is that, often Witherfall gets, it's labeled as melodic metal. I feel like there's no label for the band, no genre. Like there's no boundaries. If you listen to this record, some songs have a lot of thrash metal influence. Some songs are like classic heavy metal. There's some prog in there. There's melodic metal in there. There's old school elements, modern elements. There's a little bit of everything. I understand that from a marketing perspective, you have to cater to something. You have to put a genre on it. You're almost forced by fans these days to be labeled as something. Do you feel like it's hard to label a band or to put categories into a band like Witherfall, considering how dynamic and how diverse you guys are and how you construct your records and songs?
I think that's one of the best compliments, is that there is no, you can't find a genre for us, because we don't really personally like genres. It's like, I think that if you were to say, if by just putting a genre out there in your mind, you already are subconsciously thinking about X band, or prog, it's a bunch of nerdy guys up there doing stuff, or if you're doing heavy metal, you're thinking of Maiden, and it's and people won't check it out, if they listen to that stuff. So and again, Queen, Zeppelin, what's their genre of music? You can't really put one on there.
Which song?
Yeah. So it's, and those are our biggest influences. I think too, like going to the record, if a record just sounds exactly the same thing all the way through, it's gonna bore me after a while.
I was waiting for Joseph to chime in, but I guess he doesn't have anything to add.
No, Jake pretty much covered it.
It's called power metal. You won't find yourself in our songs.
I might have used that term, but I hid it within the review, so I hope I'm not going to offend anybody by slightly referring to it. One of the things that I really enjoyed was the sound. You guys were able to create this big sound, but it's not muddied. It's very well defined. Like you could hear every single element of the sound. So it's almost like two faces to the same coin. you could listen to how everything comes together in this big wall of sound that comes at you, but at the same time, you can digest all the different pieces, all the different elements that went into creating that sound. What do you attribute to that?
That's Jim Morris. I would like to think that
You'd
our
like to take credit.
compositions are, yeah, I mean, our compositions are, you know, well constructed, you know, but like, I gotta say, like, the reason we went with Jim instead of Zeus this time, I mean, just look at some of the records that he's done. I mean, some of the best sounding, you know, metal records. I mean, the Sabotage, Handful of Rain. I remember growing up listening to that. Love the way that sound is, like heavy metal Broadway, you know?
Yeah.
I think also just we strived really hard on the execution of parts on this, the best performances possible, and so you're not going to have that blend of, you know, something's off just a little bit, and like Joseph was saying too, we the composition, we understand music, and you know, certain things will unintentionally could sound like shit, you cacophony, you know, if you don't compose them outright. So you know, there's moments for that are cool, but yeah, I think it's just a combination of all of that on this.
And for you, Jake, coming into this album, do you had any specific goal in mind as far as the guitar sound was concerned, or what do you wanted out of the guitars for this record? Or was it more of like an organic approach as you two guys worked on the tracks together?
For the actual sound of the guitar, yeah. I mean, I think everyone should strive to outdo their last, you know, with performances and writing and the overall production of it. So I definitely wanted to get a guitar tone that I was like super proud of, and I think we achieved that. I mean, that a lot of that goes to Schaefer, because I mean, he's the master at that rhythm sound, and a huge sound. And for the geeks out there, we used a few different amps. We used a Rev, which was really great. That was the whole majority of the sound. And then Schaefer had I think we used, like, I have a Soldano SLO 100 too, but I can't remember what we used it on. And we just used, he had some other cool, like, kind of like very boutique amplifiers that especially used for like clean sounds. And we had a lot of fun, I think, with experimenting around with some wacky pedals. And
there's a dozen guitars as well on the record.
Yeah, we used baritones, like shit. I mean, I think we spent like 6 hours one day listening to acoustic guitar sounds, which was fucking miserable, because you're like, difference on playing on.
You should, like, there's nothing worse than 4 guys with really good ears sitting in a room listening to the same sound and all having different opinions on it. And you know, no one's wrong. Like, nobody's wrong. Like, we're all, you know, really good at what we do.
Perception, right? Everybody has their own perception of what they're listening to.
Right.
And especially with an acoustic guitar sound, because a lot of the time it's the player. So if I start getting lazy on it, it's like, hey, you know, fucking stay here. You know, you're not giving us, you know, giving us a great enough argument here. Yeah, but we worked really hard on that. We worked really hard on, again, it was the smoothest Witherfall record we've done to date with production. Joseph knows exactly the number of days between Prelude versus this.
Yeah, Prelude was over 100. Jake left on like day 40 something to go out on tour. Was that Demons or Iced Earth?
That was Iced Earth at that point.
Iced Earth. And I stayed behind for another like almost 2 weeks. And then by the time Jake got back, nothing had been done. And so I had to fly back out and fucking like crack the whip and hire extra engineers and fucking like, so like this record was a pleasure. I mean, it was about 40 something days. The other one was over 100. And like, you know, this one was relatively stress-free. I mean, you know, like you got all of us bickering about like, do we add the 9 or the fucking 4th, you know, like, or like, you know, a little too much wine and like John like eating all the pork rinds, you know, like you just like all those like crazy, fun, loud, like it would be obnoxious to outsiders, like some of the hijinks from our recording sessions. But
Sounds like you guys had a blast though, and
it was
I think
amazing.
and I think it really comes across on the album, because I'll save the comment that I was going to say for later, but it definitely comes across. It definitely comes across on the record. And for you, Joseph, how do you approach your vocals in terms of the lyrical content in the songs? Do you pull emotion? Do you pull energy out of the lyrics, out of the melody, or does it come from somewhere else?
I don't pull anything from the melody. The melody's inspired by the emotion. I don't write standalone melodies or standalone lyrics. It's all like whole cloth, like for the most part. I mean, there's always like the exception, but like I don't think that's where maybe some songwriters go astray, is you can't pull emotion out of like a melody, you know, like especially when you're dealing with what in essence is pop music, like it's folk music, you know, like this is like you're telling a story to someone else, you know, like when I write a melody, it's attached to something. It's not, I'm not sitting here just plucking a piano. And we don't write like where like you just like dicking around on a guitar, feeling around like, oh, I like what I just accidentally fucking played. Like that's not how we do it. Like everything is with intent and has something behind it. Like we don't tend to show up and go, here you go, here's this full piece of music. Like that's not how we work. Like we'll show up with a piece, like, does this have any legs? Like Jake will send me a riff, or like I'll have like a chorus idea with a chord progression. I'll send it to him. Hey, what do you think of this? You know, and then we sit down together and everything just avalanches from there. Like you pull the content, like the lyrics, like, and the melodies and the music and Jake's guitar parts and the keyboards and everything just kind of like play off of each other and feed off of like, oh, like now I know what this song is about. Okay, now like I can get into like really digging in and getting all the nuances of the melody. You know, like it's not acting.
No, I wasn't saying that it was acting before. I was just saying, like, if you pull some of the, I mean, because the lyrics, obviously, some of the songs, there's an emotional drive in terms of how the lyrics feel and how they sound, and specifically when you're performing and how they're coming out of you, that for the listener that can interpret it in a certain way. So I was wondering if you took a little bit of that from the lyrics, like from the content of the lyrics, you go back to where you wrote them to where they came from.
Oh yeah, I mean the performances, if you're talking about the performance, yeah, I mean that happens live and in the studio, you know, like if it's real and it's good and it does what it's supposed to do, like it should pull you into it, you know.
I can see that. All right, that's exactly what I was hoping to get from you, because I've seen you live, so I've seen what you've done live and how you interpret the situation that you're in. So I was wondering if there was a little bit of that happening in the studio as well.
Yeah, no, we don't. Jake can tell you, we don't have a sterile studio atmosphere or environment going on.
Not for vocals.
I already know there's a lot of wine. I already know there's a lot of wine. So.
Wine and yeah, I mean a lot of hyperbole and you know, good-natured ribbing and, you know, sometimes tears, sometimes headbutts, you know.
There's a little bit of everything.
A lot of yelling.
Lots of
fucking yelling.
Vocal time is at least on this last record we did, like we'd start at like 9 a.m. in the morning, like get guitars, and you know, when Anthony was there doing all the bass master tracking, and then we'd like usually have a, you know, go out to eat at like 7, and then vocals would be like 9 till like 4. And that's when the party started.
It seems
it was
like
always kind of fun for me because it's like, fuck, I've been working all day, and it was like, now I finally get to have a fucking drink, and then you listen to Joseph do his stuff, and it was cool, man. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did it all in the room. There was no booth. Like it was all 4 of us in the same room, with me singing. We're all in headphones.
Yeah. That was cool because that added a whole different dynamic to it. Versus I think the vocal booth's cool, but like you lose some of that.
That was the best part of it, and why one of the reasons why we wanted John is like for that type of thing. I mean, John, we're all 4 in the room, but like Jake's doing fucking rhythm guitars, and you got John Schaefer sitting over your shoulder, like looking at you in the fucking eye, looking at your picking hand, like, brother, that's not tight. What the fuck is that shit? You know, like, and that inspires you to nail it. And like, you know, he's in a fucking chair while I'm standing there singing, you know, and they got John or Jake and Jim, and Schaefer's staring at you while you're trying to fucking sing this part. I mean, like in some of your favorite records growing up, you know, and like that was what we wanted. We wanted those critical ears and eyes on it. And,
does it become more organic in that setting like that versus?
No, I don't think organic's the word. I think it's charged. Like it exposes everything. Like, you know, the thing is like the way we write, we don't, or I mean, when you write stuff like this, you don't even know if like you're going to be able to fucking pull it off like the way that it's in your head. So when you get in the room, you know, like there's sometimes that like, oh fuck, am I even gonna be able to do this? But when you have like such a charged environment, like you're like, fuck that, I'm not gonna fucking pussy out on this. I'm gonna get out. I don't care how many fucking takes I have to do. Like, I don't care, like, if I have to fucking yell and scream and go in the other room and fucking hit something, it doesn't fucking matter, you know? And having John there, like, he's not gonna shy away from an argument and tell you, like, oh, that wasn't fucking good enough. Like, either change it or keep going till it's right, you know? That's what we needed. That's why we wanted a co-producer, or, you know, he got a top line, of course, but you know, when we were doing the other records, it's just us, like, you know, so you're trying to have that hat of being in the moment, emotional, and just perform, and also trying to have that critical hat on, and that's really tough to do effectively.
It sounds like you guys had an awesome time in the studio. Like, you know, I know it only took like 46 days, like you said. Maybe you guys should have prolonged it a little bit more. It sounds like you guys are missing the time you had together in the studio.
Well, we actually, I mean, it started like in April, I think, April 2020, when we were with Marco. And the thing is, it's kind of like when you're making a record, like, you know how the time in the studio is going to be, regardless, just the drum tracks, how the drum tracks go. And we've had it both ways. With Marco, we had a fantastic time. I mean, that was just Joseph and I with Marco and an engineer, Brad Cook. And we were in LA, and it was like the first time we like ever met Marco. And so you're kind of like, okay, how's this guy gonna be? You know, is he gonna be like really uptight kind of dude? And it's like, he fit right in with us like a glove. And we were too good. We had a lot of fun. I mean, those were other nights too. He's a big wine fan too. So, I mean, those sessions were great. I mean, when you're dealing with players like Marco and Anthony, you can be like kids in a candy store with them, because they just, you can speak, especially when you can speak the language of you know, the terminology on stuff to get shit out of your head quicker. And those guys can just take all of your ideas. Like, for example, All Blew Away, that section where it goes into the instrumental, and there's all the time signatures going on. There's the tempo changes. you know, my favorite moment was when we're like, okay, well, we're coming up to this part. Let's see what happens here. And Marco just kills it, destroys it, nails everything. And we're like, wow, okay, well, we got that. Let's move on. And he's like, I can give you like 15 other versions of this. Like, you know, we're like, holy shit. So that was, I mean, that was so much fun there too. When stuff's going well and because Joseph and I, we don't even write like our demos are so bare bones. They're basically just like, they're almost just kind of like notes, like scratch notes on like, okay, here's this idea, here's what we're doing there. So it's amazing that these guys can actually play to those. But we don't do anything with like a drum machine or anything like that. Like I've heard pre-production demos from guys that are like, it sounds just like the record pretty much. And it's like, we don't do that at all. So when we go into the studio, we have everything in our head. So but you know, it's not there until it's there. So it's always great when you're working with guys that can get that out.
Guys that really complimented you two and your vision for what you wanted for this album.
Totally. Yeah. 100%.
Was there a track on this record that gave you guys some gray hair that was a little bit difficult to get it to where you needed it to be?
I think we probably have different ones for personal reasons. Yeah, I mean, there's a part, I know Jim's answer. There's a Tempest there's a section of Tempest that was a bit of a nightmare.
Anyway, that's my favorite song on the album. I just want to put that out there.
Cool, man.
My favorite track on the album.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's one of mine too. That and All Blew Away.
Those time signature changes are a maze, and they happen every other measure.
That song blew my mind when I was listening to it. I was like the whole album is solid, but that track, there's something in there. It's hard for me to put my finger on it, but I just love how that track comes across, the sound that it has, how it moves, the dynamic movements that it has. It's just an incredible song all around.
Thank you, man. Yeah, we have a video for that coming out. And that, so yeah, I'd say the middle section of the breakdown section of Tempest and the River was also, believe it or not, the shortest song that sounds like it's the simplest is not. That song is complex. And
The River is definitely the one for many reasons.
Yeah.
First of all, the writing of it, like Jake sent me this demo and I had to fit the vocal melody I heard in my head, I had to like Frankenstein it and move pieces around and his demo was just like him playing that intro guitar part with no click, you know, like just out in the air, like his dad's throwing keys around, the cat's screaming, fucking, you know, so like for me, well, the way we work and why it works is like everything gets molded from the ground up. It's not like, here's the thing, like right to it, you know? So like he doesn't mind if I go ahead and fucking totally like, you know, gut the piece and move it around. But that, like trying to get that on a grid was almost impossible. Like it was impossible. So like I had to move little pieces, copy and paste to add another round of like the arpeggio, but it's not to a click yet. So like when it came time to like actually get a demo happening that, you know, like say the drums could play to, like figuring out what tempo it was. And like, I mean, it moves so subtly. It doesn't sound like it's in any like weird time signatures, but it moves around. Like that whole intro moves around. Like there's like an extra beat here and there. Like
4/4 to like a 2/4 section, but then it doesn't do that.
And the 3, then the 3, like it doesn't come.
You know,
and that's just like, that's the organic way of writing is you get out what's in your head and then worry about all the fucking, you know, labeling and what it is later, you know, instead of going, well, I want this to be in 3/4 and I want, no, like get it, it's in your head, just get it out. And then the fact that the melody is like a 4 over the 3 going on. So like when we were in the studio with Marco, he's like playing to like the guitar part, and I'm like, no. Like he's like, what's wrong? And like I have to go in there and like just there's a piano, and I played him the melody in the meter, like just kind of waving my hand in the meter and playing the melody. He's like, like like light bulb, like, okay, all right, boom, next take, it's in. But like all these little, it's a simple song like when you hear it, because it's like it's a guitar, it's a vocal, you know, drums come in, it's just an electric guitar with a simple rhythm, but there's so much intricacy and complex stuff going on behind the scenes to make it sound so simple, you know, like just the recording the guitars. And Jake will tell you, like, it's his favorite part of recording is recording acoustic guitars, like just getting it so that there's no extraneous fretting noise, or like, you know, I'm like a real stickler for like how like when you're finger picking, like it should be even. I even like used to yell at this fucking music theory teacher, because I'm like, well, you know, like you're notating dynamics, you know, like forte, piano forte, whatever, right? And I'm like, well, what about when one note you want forte and the other one not? So like, so that type of stuff really, like, I pay a lot of attention to. So like when one finger is triggering a note that has a weird frequency to me, I'm like, no, wait. Like, you got to do something else with that fucking finger, because it's just poking out too much, you know. And like that's when like wine bottles start getting thrown around, like after like 6 hours of like trying out 8 different guitars, like 3 different mics, you know, different preamps, and then all of a sudden like you hear like a little noise and you're like, oh nope, gotta fix that.
Going back to your threesome remark, that's what we should use. You got to do something else with that fucking finger.
By the way, I love that line. I think that's a great line. That needs to be like a bumper sticker inside the studios or something, you know, just do something else with that fucking finger. I
what was that story you had about was it Ace Frehley that like
oh yeah, that's right, that's on I think that's on the river, because we were just going through the video that's about to come out. It'll come out tomorrow, I guess, which will be
2 a.m.
out. But when you listen to it on like headphones, I call it the Ace Frehley move, which is like you can hear my bracelets jingling on there. And you know, that was like a story when like Ace was so fucked up, he came into the studio and like on his picking hand, he had it in like Gene Simmons is listening back and he's like, Ace, you got to take off your bracelets. And he's like, that's fucking rock and roll, man. Sounds like shit. So yeah, with the Ace Frehley moment on that. But one thing about that song was when Joseph was talking about that demo, like that guitar, when I was doing, I'd written, like I had done that demo and sent it to Joseph. It was, we were on a break from Demons and Wizards. Like we had just done Vakken, and then we were home in the States for like 2 weeks, and I was down in Florida, and somehow I ended up with Schaefer's acoustic guitar, like the one that he used on that tour. My parent was probably fucked up, and someone was like, hey, you're taking this back. And I was like, okay. I didn't remember until it came off the fucking, you know, conveyor belt. But I never played it before, so I just picked it up, and that came out. And then when we were tracking, we were going through all the acoustic guitars, and it was like, you know what? And something just wasn't, you know, again, those like frequency things and the nuances with the sound of the guitars, we weren't doing it. And it was like, you know what? Let's just try out this one. And I think it ended up having to be the actual guitar that we used. It was like the original one that I first picked up. The River came out, and we ended up using it as the master track. So it's funny how like you can pick up a certain instrument and it'll influence you in a way.
I have a feeling the next time you guys are on tour, hopefully soon, once we get over this damn pandemic, and you guys come to Toronto, I think I'm going to have to bring some wine.
Oh, Oh,
and a lot of it.
we'll have a lot of stuff for you.
I have a feeling I'm gonna have to bring a box or something. Like one bottle is just one bottle is not gonna cut it.
You're gonna need a
Shit.
crate, man. We appreciate that, man. We would love to have a drink with you, man. And we'll have our own Witherfall wine by that point too. We actually, I mean, the second batch, we already sold out of the first one.
Oh wow, wow! I like my wine myself, so I'll be sure to bring some wine to the show. But we'll have wine after the set. God forbid you guys lose track of where you are.
We're
There you go.
so immune to it by that.
I have one last question for you guys, and that is, in your view, after everything that we've gone through, talking about putting this record together, all the fun times in the studio, all the troubles and all the drinking, is this a moment-defining record for Witherfall?
I would hope so. I mean, yeah, you know, I mean, people always say that we have three. I mean, one's an EP, but the third record we've always told is like a kind of a make or break for a band. You know, you're gonna have. I think it makes fans, or then you also have people that are like on the edge if they're new ones are coming in. And I think with this record, it's gonna attract a lot more fans. But at the same time, like you were saying too, it keeps that Witherfall sound that's who we are. I guess time will tell.
Well, what do you think, Joseph?
I think our 10th record will be the Keystone record.
Yeah, I mean,
that will be your Black Album.
Yeah. When we
exactly.
record Bob Rock.
Bring on the haters.
Yeah.
The reason I asked you guys that question is because I honestly feel like this is the best. I know this is cliche. Every time any band releases an album is always the best album that they've released. It's not always true, but it's the cliche that everybody goes with. I feel like this is the best record you guys have put together. Overall, from structure, songs, the dynamics of the record, the fluidity of the album, the sound is phenomenal. I love the drums on this record. I absolutely love the drums, the sound that they have. They're earthy. That's a word that not a lot of people perhaps use to describe the drum sounds, but I'm going with it. It's earthy. I just love everything you guys threw at me on this album. And that's why I've asked you that question, because sometimes when you're building a record or putting a record, maybe you're not able to see the forest from the trees because you've been so deeply involved in it. For me, coming from the outside, having a fresh look, I feel like this is the best album you guys have ever done.
Well, yeah, thanks a lot, man. And I like that term earthy too for drums, because it's funny. When we were talking to Schaefer about doing this, he had an idea of the drum sound. And we're like, no, we don't want it to sound. We want it to be more organic. And so that's cool.
Yeah. That. That's Brad. Brad had a lot to do with the drum sound. I mean, that guy did the drums for the Foo Fighters Everlong. Yeah, I mean, that guy knows how to get a great drum sound.
Yeah, you guys nailed it. I think you guys got the right people together on this, and the result, it's there. Curse of Autumn. This album is magnificent. I was really blown away by the overall experience that this record had to offer. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. And like I said, best album to date, at least according to me, whatever that is worth.
Well,
thanks so much
to see your review.
Yeah,
well, it's a shining one because, like, you know, sometimes I try to look for something slightly negative or negative. I mean, sometimes the album is so good, it's hard to find anything negative about it. And then if you only list out the great things about the record, people saying you're a homer and you're just like, pumping people's tires. On this record, I was like, what am I going to say negative about it? I mean, like, I couldn't, like, I look under the hood, I look under the car, like, there's nothing really negative about this album. It's just a really solid record, front to back. There's no weak spots. There's no skippable songs. And it's an album that by the time you finish, you're ready to listen to it again because you had such a great time and you not even noticed the time went by so quickly, you know? So to me, all of those things put together make it a great album.
Well,
thank you,
man. Hopefully other people think that same way and get our Spotify streams up.
I really hope that this is the album that, you know, does that for you guys, because the talent I feel has always been there. But this album, for some reason, I really honestly feel like there's something special about it. and I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. And going back to the earlier thing, I hate to put a label on the band or to put you guys within a box or a genre, because if you listen to this album, this is just good music. Never mind metal, never mind rock, never mind, you know, prog, whatever. Music is music, and this is good music all around. And I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people, not necessarily even people who listen to metal music, because if you enjoy quality music, I think you're going to enjoy this album.
Man, well, again, thanks. And that's, I for one, like, really appreciate the fact that it's, you know, that you're calling it just music and not the genre stuff like we were talking about beforehand.
I have a beef with that whole genre thing, because I think it boxes bands in, and it almost tries to define who you are. And from a fan's perspective, you come in with a preconceived set of ideas, and then when the album doesn't meet those ideas that you have, you automatically dismiss the record as not being good. And you don't even, it's almost like you're not even listening to it. You have to listen to it and judge it on its own merits. And I think this album speaks for itself. I think you just let it play and let the music do the talk.
You mean you don't like the term technical European, Norwegian, Led Zeppelin influenced prog metal? You know?
Oh, I thought you were going to go with what was it? Apocalyptic Christ denying. I don't know. There's a movie, Heavy Trip, where the guys have this genre, and the genre is like a sentence long of different genres put together. So I just hate that kind of stuff. I think this album is an album that stands on its own. You just listen to it, enjoy it. Great record, guys.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate doing this with the two of you. It's a pleasure. Next time you guys are in town, I promise I'll show up with more than one bottle of wine.
We need one for each guy.
Yeah, I'll bring one for each, and I'll bring different styles in case, you know, everybody has different tastes, different flavors.
Yeah.
Oh,
Anthony
man.
likes Pepsi.
All right, guys, take care.
Thanks a lot, man. Thank you, Pedro.